You know why I'm here, I know why I'm here, let's get on with it right now.
Disgusting!
The first record I'm going to talk about on this fine sunny day is going to be Psycho Candy by the Jesus and Mary Chain. If you've been up to date on my content, you would have noticed that I purchased this from Olaf's record store, and to be honest, it was very expensive, but given what it is, I think it was relatively reasonable. This cost £30. But it's the original pressing from 1985, and that's sort of the median for that, especially one that's in as nice condition as this. This is real mint condition. The record is spotless, looks brand new. So yeah, to give a bit of context, if you don't know about the Jesus and Mary Chain and this album, essentially it's just really kind of sugary sunshine pop, which is like sort of drenched and glazed in this like really harsh, almost industrial fuzzy guitars. And I think the name of the album really reflects that. In the album cover, you know, Psycho Candy, the sort of contrast between those two words sums up this album very well. These guys came from East Kilbride in Scotland, which happens to be just down the road from where my dad grew up. So he knows all about them. But yeah, this is often cited as a classic album, which is kind of looking forward towards shoegaze. I've heard this described as like proto-shoegaze. I agree with that to an extent, but for me personally, it actually kind of calls back to earlier groups such as, you know, The Cure's early records and also Joy Division a little bit, but maybe with a little bit more of a sort of bright pop sound over the top of it instead of the darker sounds of those groups. Yeah, I mean, it's just got such a sound, and the drums on this record are really strange. You get a sense that they're definitely inspired by the Velvet Underground a lot, not only aesthetically but musically. You know, so many similarities between these guys and the Velvet Underground. You know, you had really sort of jangly, you know, pretty pop songs, you know, which the Velvet Underground had, but then you've also got these harsh soundscapes, this harsh sort of avant-garde experimentation over the top of that, definitely lifted from the Velvets. And also the drumming, because I'm pretty sure a lot of the drumming on here is like, you know, two drums or one drum's just banging. I mean, the drums on the opening track, Just Like Honey, which is the most popular song off of this, sounds like somebody just banging a bass drum and banging like a cutlery drawer, you know, like just a drawer with knives and forks in it. It sounds like someone just creating the rhythm from banging those two things and then throwing it for a bunch of reverb. Incidentally, the drummer on this record was Bobby Gillespie, who of course went on to be the frontman and singer of Primal Scream, which is quite a strange fact. Yeah, I mean, a couple of the tracks, especially on the B-side, I felt were kind of akin to the Velvet Underground White Light, White Heat especially. I mean, that album was just brutal, you know. This album sounds like it was recorded in a giant empty hall, you know, or a giant concert hall. You almost feel like you're actually at the Hammersmith Apollo or something, sitting in the mid row watching these guys play live, but you're the only one in the audience, and it's just got this echo about it, you know. Some of the guitars on this record sound like, I don't know, like a chainsaw scraping against aluminium or something. Pretty good pressing too, although it does suffer from one of the things that a lot of records suffer from this period is sounding amazing at the beginning, but then sounding a lot more distorted and undesirable as it gets to the centre of the record, as the grooves get more compressed. So it does have that about it, but overall it's still a really good pressing and a great way to enjoy this album. And the funny thing with this is that I paid £30 for this record, and it is in mint condition to be fair, but my mum tells me that she already owns this album and that it's in the loft. Now, my mum has this like box of records which allegedly has some incredible pressings in it, such as like original Smiths albums and whatnot, but I've never seen it in my life. It must just be hidden away somewhere, or God knows, but hopefully I'll find that at some point. But yeah, you pay £30 for it and then realise that you basically have it, but you know, it might not be as good condition, and you know, I haven't got that at the moment. I have to go looking for it. The next record I purchased was Songs of Faith and Devotion by Depes Mode. This is an interesting album because it's sort of like industrial rock mixed with dance and some of the dance trends of the time, but you can definitely hear some influences of rock and roll, like grunge music that was very prevalent at the time, seeping in. I think Dave, the lead singer Dave Garn from this band, was living in LA at the time and was very immersed in the rock scene and the grunge scene, so you hear that kind of slipping in here. And I think when they made this record, they were still doing it in like the electronic fashion that they'd done all their other records. I mean, they're one of the finest electronic electro groups of all time. You know, they know what they're doing, but they were incorporating more live loops into the electronic music process, you know, probably very similar to what the Nine Inch Nails were doing at the time, sort of getting rock guitars and drums and then looping them, and constructing songs in a similar way, but in a more rock and roll sort of fashion. I think they adapted to this sound quite well. This isn't a perfect album, but it's one of their better albums. You know, it's not quite as good as the 3 albums that have come before, but it is still one of their stronger records. There's a track on here called Rush, which has this really distorted synth. It feels like it sort of fills a purpose of where a really distorted electric guitar would be. But I suppose that's what you do when you're an electronic band and you want to go down the rock and roll path. You know, you get a synthesizer, put a load of reverb and distortion on it to sort of create that sound in your own way. I really like the final track on here, which is called Higher Love. I think Dave Gahan sounds quite a lot like a cow on this track. It's really good that he kind of got in touch with nature and animals and really sort of conveyed that spirit of the animals through his vocals. I really like when artists can do that. There's also a really good track on here called Get Right, which sounds like an electro gospel version of All Around the World by Oasis. If there's one song on this album that I don't care for much, it's the 3rd track, Condemnation, which is said to have one of Dave Gahan's finest vocals, but for me it doesn't quite work. I think maybe I've heard the track too many times. Depeche Mode have always been, I felt, one of the most dramatic bands ever in terms of the way they sing. Both Martin Gore and Dave Gahan, they really do put on such a dramatic performance when they sing, which I love. But I almost feel that this track almost takes it too far. He sings the words with such desperation. Perhaps I've just heard it too many times, you know, because it doesn't quite work for me. And the song, to me, sounds a little bit like Silent Night, you know, the classic Christmas carol. Don't know why, but now that I've got that in my head, I can't get it out. Gary Newman was heavily inspired by this album, and it actually really helped him to re-establish himself as a musician and relaunch his career. By 1993 or 94, whenever this was, he had really kind of come to a grinding halt with his career. You know, he'd started out doing things like Cars and, you know, that classic electronic sound, but I think it had worn very thin and he was out of ideas. Then this thing came along and it just totally inspired him to go in the direction which he's now going in all these years later. You know, that sort of darker sort of industrial rock electronic sound, really the kind of thing that the Nine Inch Nails pioneered, which I'm sure was an influence on this.
My wife got me this album for the first time and it changed everything for me. It's a fantastic album. It made me love music again. I didn't realise I'd sort of fallen out of love with it, and I hadn't enjoyed it for some time, and it was hearing this that made me realise somehow. And I went back to music with a different attitude after this album. It went back to being a hobby.
So one thing that I do have to say about this pressing, it sounds wonderful. It doesn't even sound like vinyl. It sounds like CD. You know, it's such a clean sound. You know, you don't get very much crackle at all. It's just one of these modern pressings which is so clean and so immaculate and has got so much bass. You know, you don't always even associate that sound with vinyl. The audio quality is just perfect, you know. One thing that I really do have to say about this, and something that I have to say about all of the Depeche Mode reissues which I've picked up, which is now 6 of them, they have got some of the nicest sleeves I have ever experienced buying vinyl reissues. Really, really thick cardstock. You know, you don't get this these days very much. Often it's very, like, underwhelmingly thin cardstock they make the sleeve out of, which feels like a bit of a rip-off because these records are getting more and more expensive. You want to get something for your money. This sleeve is just absolutely glorious. It's reflective, it's shiny, it's thick. Yeah, all of these Depeche Mode reissues have just got a wonderful sleeve, and yeah, if there's one reason to buy these, it's that. You know, obviously you've got to love the music as well, but if you're a fan, man, get it. Just get it. Yeah, they have extraordinarily nice jackets. Not all of them do. And you pull the sleeve apart, you get the lyrics, of course, you get a nice big old essay on there from Daniel Miller, who was, of course, the guy behind Mute Records, who signed Depes Mode and sort of mentored them throughout their whole journey. And he basically explains where the band were at the time of making this album. You know, Dave had moved to LA and immersed himself within the American rock scene. The guys, they didn't really know what direction they wanted to go in. They were working with the producer Flood. They probably all had their own ideas. This was quite a chaotic time for the band. You know, my mum saw them on this tour. It was at the Crystal Palace. Apparently it was a phenomenal show, one of the best shows she's ever seen in her whole life. This was in 1993. I think it wrapped up the first leg of the tour, that show, and yeah, I think Dave Gahan described that tour as like a mental asylum going on the road. So yeah, that's that. Songs of Faithful Devotion by Depes Mode. And incidentally, the inner sleeve for this album is very, very similar to the inner sleeve of the Mary Chain record. So next album I've got to show is something very, very different from my music collection and very different for this channel. It's a genre of music which I don't talk about, well, ever, really. It is Symbolic by the band the death metal band. My friend Matthew was so proud of me for buying this. I sent it to him and he was like, "You legend, you!" You wouldn't believe it by looking at the guy, but he is the biggest metal fan you could ever meet. He loves these guys among thousands of other metal artists. But yeah, why did I buy this? Well, I've got a bit of a history of metal music. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, my drum teacher at the time was a big like metal fan, and he played in all kinds of thrash metal bands, so I kind of briefly got into bands like Slayer around that time, and then I just kind of like lost interest in it after that point, and never really returned to it. I think the problem with metal music is that, technically speaking, a lot of it is absolutely brilliant. The musicianship on display is just second to none. It is so tight with a lot of these metal bands. But I think by nature, the genre I find highly, highly fatiguing on the ears. I feel like I listen to one metal song and I go, yeah, bring it on, this is great. And then after that one song, my ears are like bleeding because it is so brutal, and it's like like the double kick drum pedals that you get, you know, those brutal sort of pounding double kick drums. I find the music to be very, very I prefer music which is more sparse, you know. I prefer music which is more chill out, more sort of elements sort of not touching each other in such a compressed, crammed way that you get with metal. However, I saw this album come up on my Discogs, and I've seen the album advertised before. I've seen it come up on so many websites talking about the greatest albums of all time, and this is often spoken about as one of the finest metal albums ever recorded. So I thought, you know what, there's got to be something in this, right? So I looked on the Discogs page for this, and people were raving about this. Not only about the music, but about the pressing. This is the first time this has been pressed for a while, and apparently it is the best pressing of this album since it originally came out in 1995. So I gave the album a listen on Spotify, and whilst it did fatigue my ears a lot, the music is so good, it piqued my interest, and it made me keep wanting to go back to it because the music is just so earwormy. I mean, there are so many riffs on this thing which will get stuck in your head. They'll get stuck in your head and they'll never come out again. You'll be, you know, doing the dishes or something on a Wednesday morning, and these rhythms and these riffs will just be sort of tattooed onto your brain, essentially. You know, I got really addicted to it. I was on a plane. I was going to meet one of our partners in New York, and I put this on the plane because it was quite a long flight, and I was just obsessed. I was listening to it, and I was looking at those little lockers where they pull the little toasties out and they serve it to you. I was looking at that and I was listening to this album, and I was like, fucking hell, this is like the greatest experience of my friggin' life. This is fucking awesome. This is like progressive rock in metal form, you know. You have these crazy songs which have several different sections, you know. And one of the only metal bands which I really like is System of a Down, because it's metal, but it's kind of mixed with different things. You know, you've got sort of these Armenian folk elements creeping in, and you have all these sort of jigs and these sort of skipping beats. And this album kind of has that. You know, you get these crazy sort of skippy rhythms and beats. You know, it's done with such precise precision that it is just addictive. So I picked up the record. I was very happy with it. This is a beautiful record. I love the artwork. It's typical metal artwork, I suppose. This is often known as their greatest album, sort of progressing the death metal genre into what could be described as melodic death metal, because the melodies on this are so strong. It really is melodic death metal, and there are even some sort of softer, more tender moments. I mean, the outro, the outro of the final track, Perennial Quest, has got this gorgeous, like, strummed guitar outro, and there's also a couple of other moments on there on the first half of the album. And yeah, one thing I saw this described as is having like these really great, like, Egyptian melodies, you know, and that, I really do get that. I mean, some of these melodies, they do have that sound. You feel like you're on like the Egyptian level of Mario Kart, you know, swerving in and out of all the pyramids and all that kind of stuff with the cool backgrounds, and that fucking big spiky dude fucking tries to knock you over, but I always miss it. Yeah, this album's insane. It might take a few listens to get into, but I'm telling you, this album's a masterpiece. Pure masterpiece. So, to recap, so far we've gone through 2Ds, we've gone through Depes Mode, Death, onto our third D, Desire. Yeah, finally picked up Desire by Bob Dylan. Already had this on CD. I saw it in Olaf's record shop for £12. This was the time I went after the time I got the Mary Chain record. This album's really good. My first introduction to this album, I think, was in the movie Dazed and Confused, where the song, what is it called? The famous one, Hurricane, is used in one of the scenes in that film. And this song is just fabulous. I mean, even my friend Matt, who really is not a Bob Dylan fan at all, he said, wow, this has actually kind of changed my opinion on the guy. Like, this song is just incredible. You know, it doesn't have that sort of acoustic-y, you know, sound that a lot of the other Dylan stuff has. This song is 8 minutes long. It doesn't feel like 8 minutes at all. It flies by. It's such a blast. It never gets old. But this album has got a really gritty, rough kind of feel about it. It feels rough around the edges, like it was sort of recorded very quickly. I think this was recorded in between two tours, actually, with his touring band. And yeah, you definitely get a really strong sense of spontaneity and sort of whatever the opposite of perfection is, I suppose, but it really works in the album's favour. And this is Bob Dylan's most collaborative record that he ever did. You know, half the songs are co-written by him and someone else, and you've got like a full band on the whole album, which feels very, very live. You know, you don't feel like you're listening to a precise studio recording. You feel like you're just sitting in a rehearsal space with the guys, but it's such a good sound. I mean, the violin player, this album's got a lot of violin on it, and the person who plays violin, he just randomly met on the street, and it's like, you know, do you want to play in this band? Do you want to be on this record? And of course, you know, it's Bob Dylan, and they were like, hell friggin' yes, let's do it. I'm a pretty big fan of pretty much all the songs, perhaps Romance in Durango, maybe a little bit less, but yeah, I mean, you've got the song Sarah, which finishes this album, which is about his wifey. When listening to this album, one thing that did really stand out to me a lot was the drum sound. I thought this had a really desirable drum sound, especially these days, what with people like Matt DeMarco and Tay Impala kicking around. You know, really, really nice sort of wooden furniture drum sound. You know, you feel like you're in a furniture store listening to it. So yeah, I mean, this record sounds lo-fi in the best way possible, you know. This is an album you've got to have on vinyl. Like, for example, the last two albums I've shown, Songs of Faith and Devotion and the Death record, like, they don't need to be on vinyl. I have them on vinyl because vinyl is fun, and also they were quite cheap. You know, those could easily be CD purchases. This one, it's got to be vinyl. It really it lends itself to that aesthetic and that sound. You know, you got to get this on vinyl, man. It is the way to listen to it. This has got a lo-fi sound in the best way possible, sort of lo-fi hi-fi, I like to call it. But yeah, I mean, the record shop I bought this from, Olaf's, one of my favourite places. I love Olaf Parker. He's the guy that runs the shop. He's a fashion designer. He's a very trendy dude, right? He plays records in the shop, and I love that. Because you go into Sister Ray these days and they're not playing vinyl half the time. They are playing digital recordings. They're playing playlists. They've got it going in the background. I think an authentic record shop should play vinyl whilst you go in, so you get the authentic crackle and you hear it over the speakers. You know, that puts you in the mood for buying stuff like this. There should be someone DJing in a record shop. You know, they shouldn't have automated background music playlists. You know, they should have someone, you know, probably the person working on the checkout, putting the groove on the record, I think that just totally takes you to the place and the mindset of buying records, especially records like this. Also, incidentally, I also found Blonde on Blonde as well in a charity shop recently. So I'll be talking about that soon. So, what is the next record? Well, it's another record which I picked up at the exact same time as Bob Dylan Desire. I got this and I got this, and it is Groove is in the Heart by Delight, the 12-inch single from 1990, 1991-ish. This is just like a perfect specimen for something that I want to own in my 12-inch vinyl collection. You know, it's a classic single, it's a classic one-hit wonder, it's a catchy tune, it's fun, it's a song which I've always enjoyed and admired. I love the artwork. It's very in line with the sort of flower power revival kind of aesthetic that was going on at that time in the early 90s, you know, very much prevalent on the De La Soul LP sleeves of the time. Yeah, and I just love it. It was £10. It was in the new in crate. £10 might seem quite expensive for a 12-inch single, but most of the copies on this on eBay are going for like £17. So for a mint condition copy, I mean, maybe not mint, but near mint, I thought £10 was very reasonable. I mean, it looks brand new. It looks like it's never been played. So, what do you get with this? Well, you get pretty much what you'd expect. You get Grooves in the Heart, you get an extended version of that song, which sort of draws out all the elements of the song, which I'm really pleased with because I've always loved all the quirky little elements in this song. Most of the elements of the song are sampled. The song starts with that brilliant sample, you know, we're going to dance and have some fun. That's a really classic bit of crate digging, that is, bringing out that old sample from that old sort of, dancing record from the 60s, whatever it was. Really classic bit of crate digging. These guys were basically just a bunch of DJs in New York City, so it's no surprise at all that they were digging out proper good samples and creatively incorporating them into music. You know, creating these great songs which are very of their time. But with this song, you drop the needle and it instantly transports you to like a groovy sort of hip party from 1991 or 1990 in New York City. You know, you really feel like it's the closest thing we have to a time machine, you know, records like this. I mean, even the smell, I mean, you know, it encapsulates that classic smell as well as the sound. So yeah, I mean, everybody knows that iconic juicy bass line sampled from Herbie Hancock, you know, do 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 do. You got all these other crazy sounds, you know, like the whistles, the and it's one of my favourite music videos of all time as well. So on the B-side, we get another track called What Is Love, which is one of the tracks which I did like from their debut album, World Clique. I liked some songs in that album, wasn't so keen on other songs. It's a really, really good, drawn-out house track. So yeah, overall, this is just a classic 12-inch single. It's one that I didn't even consciously realise my collection needed until I found it, and now I found it, the collection couldn't live without it. It's a great one. So the next record I picked up, you would have seen in the vlog, and it was Some Might Say by Oasis, 7-inch single. I think partly the reason why I picked this up is that I wanted to get the Whatever single that came out, which was on this sort of dazzly blue splatter vinyl, reissued, but I wasn't too keen on the B-side track for that one, so I kept holding back on buying it. And then when I saw this in HMV, I thought, you know what, I love Some Might Say, and I love Talk Tonight, which is the track on the B-side. I'm going to go for it. It was grossly overpriced. It was £14, and that's crazy because I bought What's the Story and Definitely Maybe for £20 each. So for an extra £6, I got a double LP, 180 gram. So it was just crazy overpriced. I mean, if you take the pricing by that logic, so £7 a track, it's going to cost you like £80 or £90 for an album. That being said, I'm still pretty pleased I bought it. It comes on a snazzy colour. It's a nice bit of Oasis merch to own. Unfortunately, it is numbered as well, which I quite like, but unfortunately the sound on this was a little bit strange. It sounded really good. However, there's this weird frequency which comes into the song about 2/3 away through the song. It's almost as if like a UFO comes down and sort of obscures quite a bit of the audio of the track. It's like this real kind of ringing frequency, and it lasts quite a long time as well. I know that the early Oasis stuff, the first couple of albums, did have a lot of strange sounds, like a lot of weird psychedelic, almost shoegazy kind of sort of brick-walled kind of sounds, but this is something else. So I really did want to sort of check whether the studio recording had this. So I went over to my LP copy of What's the Story Morning Glory, and I checked out, is this sound on that version of it? And it is kind of there, but it's not as prevalent as on this 7-inch single, which kind of leaves me to think there's a bit of a manufacturing issue going on with this, which is really cheeky because it cost a lot of money for what it is. So yeah, perhaps I did get a little bit ripped off with this one. I mean, it's nice to have, but yeah, not great. And finally, the final record, which I got. I'm really starting to burn my voice out doing this video. The final record which I got, Changing Faces, Godley and Cream and 10cc. This is a big old fat best of for 10cc, with some of the stuff that Godley and Cream went on to do after 10cc, and also some of the singles which the other two guys in 10cc did after the split. One thing that I found with this is that it made me discover some of these absolutely fabulous Godley and Cream singles from the late 70s and the early 80s. You know, we're talking tracks like Under Your Thumb and Englishman in New York, Snack Attack. These really, really strange, experimental, quirky pop songs with witty lyrics, interesting experimentation. These guys were just pop alchemists, you know, they really were. I've heard the 10cc tracks a million times, so nothing new there. I've got the LPs, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. However, I did discover these great new tracks from Godley and Cream, which I didn't know about. I didn't know how good their career was as a duo, and this has really opened up my eyes to sort of explore more of the stuff that they did together. I think you know, a lot of people do think that those two guys were kind of the arty, creative side of the group, and yeah, when you look at stuff like this, it's hard to disagree with that. So yeah, I already own this on CD. I've seen some people out there saying that the CD sounds better than the vinyl because the vinyl has one hell of a lot of tracks crammed onto each side. I mean, there's about 17 tracks on this, and it's a single LP. The audio suffers a little bit from it. You know, you get to the centre, it gets a bit crapper sounding, but frankly, so many records from this period suffer from that. I don't think it's particularly bad, so I wouldn't hold off buying it. It's still a really friggin' cool record. This is from 1987 or something. So that's it, that's the update. I'm really glad that I was able to get this video out there, and expect one hell of a lot more vinyl, CD and music related videos on this channel coming up. Yes, let's do it! Yes! Bye bye.